Infantry Mark I, Matilda I, A11. This infantry tank represented Britain's first attempt at creating a heavily armored assault vehicle for supporting infantry advances. Designated A11, the Matilda I was designed in 1935 under strict budget constraints that limited its capabilities. The tank measured 15 feet 5 inches long, 7 feet 6 inches wide, and 6 feet 1 inch tall, weighing 11 tons. Its armor ranged from 10 to 65 millimeters, providing exceptional protection for its era against contemporary anti-tank weapons. The Matilda I mounted only a single Vickers .303-inch machine gun in a small two-man turret, rendering it ineffective against enemy armor. Power came from a Ford V8 engine, generating 70 horsepower, achieving a maximum speed of 8 miles per hour on roads. Only 139 Matilda I tanks were produced between 1938 and 1940. The British Expeditionary Force deployed these vehicles to France in 1940, where their heavy armor proved resistant to German 37mm anti-tank guns during early engagements. However, their lack of anti-tank capability and mechanical unreliability resulted in all vehicles being abandoned during the Dunkirk evacuation in May 1940. Infantry Mark II, Matilda II, a 12. This infantry tank earned the nickname Queen of the Desert through exceptional performance in North African campaigns. Despite sharing the Matilda name, the A-12 design bore no relation to its predecessor, representing a completely new tank project initiated in 1936. The Matilda II measured 18 feet 5 inches long, 8 feet 6 inches wide, and 8 feet 3 inches tall, weighing 26.9 tons. Its defining characteristic was exceptional armor protection, with frontal plates reaching 78 millimeters thickness that proved virtually impenetrable to German and Italian anti-tank guns during early war engagements. Armament consisted of a QF 2-pounder gun capable of defeating contemporary enemy armor, supported by a BISA 7.92mm coaxial machine gun. Twin AEC diesel engines generated 174 horsepower combined, achieving a maximum speed of 15 miles per hour on roads. Production reached approximately 2,891 vehicles between 1937 and 1943. The Matilda II achieved legendary status during Operation Compass in December 1940, where just 48 tanks decimated 10 Italian divisions in the Western Desert. British and Australian forces employed Matilda IIs throughout the North African campaign until 1942, when German long-barreled guns finally neutralized their armor advantage. Infantry Mark III, Valentine. This infantry tank became the most produced British tank of World War II, with over 8,500 units manufactured between 1940 and 1944. Vickers developed the Valentine as a private venture in 1938, submitting the design to the War Office on Valentine's Day, which inspired its unofficial name. The tank measured 17 feet 9 inches long, 8 feet 7 inches wide, and 7 feet 5 inches tall, weighing approximately 17 tons depending on variant. The Valentine initially mounted a QF 2-pounder gun, though later variants upgraded to the 6-pounder and eventually the 75mm gun to maintain effectiveness against evolving enemy armor. Various engines powered different production marks, including AEC diesel and GMC gasoline units, generating between 135 and 165 horsepower. Maximum speed reached 15 miles per hour on roads. The 3-man crew operated in cramped conditions, with the commander forced to serve as loader due to the compact turret design. Britain supplied over 3,000 Valentines to the Soviet Union under Lend-Lease, where they saw extensive service on the Eastern Front. The Valentine served throughout North Africa, providing reliable mechanical performance that made it beloved by crews despite limited firepower. Infantry Mark IV, Churchill, a 22. This heavily armored infantry tank became one of Britain's most important armored vehicles through exceptional versatility and specialized variants. The Churchill originated from a 1940 requirement for a heavily armored infantry tank capable of crossing the shell-cratered battlefields reminiscent of World War I trench warfare. The design measured 24 feet 5 inches long, 10 feet 8 inches wide, and 8 feet 2 inches tall, weighing approximately 38 to 40 tons, depending on variant. Frontal armor reached 102 millimeters on later marks, providing exceptional protection that allowed Churchills to survive hits from most German anti-tank weapons. The Churchill initially mounted a QF 2-pounder gun in the turret with a 3-inch howitzer in the hull, though later variants upgraded to 6-pounder and eventually 75mm guns. Power came from a Bedford twin-6 petrol engine, generating 350 horsepower, achieving a maximum speed of 15 miles per hour on roads. The Churchill's distinctive feature was exceptional climbing ability due to its extended track length and low center of gravity, allowing it to traverse terrain impossible for other tanks. Production reached 5,640 vehicles between 1941 and 1945. Churchills fought throughout North Africa, Italy, and Northwest Europe, earning distinction for their ability to climb steep Italian hillsides. The tank's most important contribution came through specialized variants known as Hobart's Funnies, including the Churchill AVRE engineering tank, Crocodile flamethrower, and bobbin matlayer that proved essential during D-Day operations. Cruiser Mark I and II A9A10. These early cruiser tanks represented Britain's first attempts at creating fast cavalry tanks for independent maneuver warfare. The cruiser Mark I, designated A9, was developed in 1934 as Britain's first purpose-built cruiser tank. The tank measured 19 feet long, 8 feet 2 inches wide, and 8 feet 8 inches tall, weighing approximately 12 tons. The design featured an unusual configuration with 3 turrets, a main turret mounting a QF 2-pounder gun and 1 Vickers machine gun, plus 2 small auxiliary turrets housing additional machine guns, operated by separate crew members. Power came from an AEC Type A 179 petrol engine, generating 150 horsepower, achieving a maximum speed of 25 miles per hour on roads. Only 125 A9 tanks were produced between 1937 and 1938. The cruiser Mark II, designated A10, was conceived as a heavy cruiser variant with increased armor protection. Despite its heavy cruiser designation, the A10 weighed only 13.7 tons, with armor reaching 30 millimeters maximum. Production reached 175 vehicles between 1938 and 1940. Both designs saw combat with the British Expeditionary Force in France during 1940, where their thin armor proved catastrophically vulnerable to German anti-tank guns. Cruiser Mark III, IV, and V, a 13 family. This family of cruiser tanks introduced the revolutionary Christie suspension to British armored forces, establishing a design lineage that influenced subsequent development. The cruiser Mark III, designated A13, represented a dramatic departure from previous British designs after a mission to the Soviet Union. In 1936 revealed the BT tank's exceptional speed and cross-country performance. Britain purchased rights to the Christie suspension system and developed the A13 around this technology. The tank measured 19 feet 9 inches long, 8 feet 4 inches wide, and 8 feet 6 inches tall, weighing 14 tons. The A13 mounted a QF 2-pounder gun with a coaxial Vickers machine gun in a distinctive faceted turret. A Nuffield Liberty Mark III petrol engine generated 340 horsepower, achieving an impressive maximum speed of 30 miles per hour on roads. Approximately 65 cruiser Mark III tanks were produced in 1939. The cruiser Mark IV, designated a 13 Mark II, incorporated lessons from early combat experience by increasing armor to 30 millimeters maximum and adding a BISA machine gun. Production reached 665 units between 1939 and 1940. The cruiser Mark V Covenanter, designated A13 Mark III, represented an attempt to improve the basic A13 design with better armor and a lower profile. However, the redesign created catastrophic engine cooling problems that proved impossible to resolve. Despite production of 1,771 vehicles between 1940 and 1943, no Covenanters ever saw combat service. The type was restricted entirely to training duties in Britain, representing one of the war's most spectacular design failures. Cruiser Mark VI Crusader, A15. This cruiser tank became the iconic British armored fighting vehicle of the North African Desert Campaign, despite chronic mechanical problems. The Crusader, designated A15, represented a completely new design project separate from the A13 family, though it retained the Christie suspension system that proved successful in earlier cruisers. Development began in 1939 with the goal of creating a more reliable and better armed cruiser tank. The tank measured 19 feet 8 inches long, 8 feet 8 inches wide, and 7 feet 4 inches tall, weighing approximately 19 tons depending on variant. The Crusader initially mounted a QF 2-pounder gun, though the Crusader 3 variant upgraded to the 6-pounder anti-tank gun in 1942 to counter improved German armor. A Nuffield Liberty Mark III petrol engine generated 340 horsepower, achieving a maximum speed of 27 miles per hour on roads. Production reached over 5,300 vehicles between 1940 and 1943, making it one of the most numerous British cruiser tanks. The Crusader entered combat during Operation Battle Axe in June 1941 and became the primary British cruiser tank throughout the Western Desert campaigns. However, the Crusader suffered chronic mechanical unreliability, particularly with its cooling system and suspension components. Despite these issues, crews appreciated its speed and maneuverability when operational. Cruiser Mark 7 Cavalier, a 24. This cruiser tank served primarily as an interim design during the transition from early war cruisers to the advanced Cromwell series. The Cavalier, designated A-24, originated from a 1941 requirement for a more heavily armored cruiser tank using the proven Nuffield Liberty engine, while designers developed the more ambitious Cromwell with its Meteor power plant. The tank measured 20 feet 10 inches long, 9 feet 1 inch wide, and 8 feet 3 inches tall, weighing approximately 27 tons. Armor ranged from 20 to 76 millimeters, representing a substantial improvement over earlier cruisers. The Cavalier mounted a QF 6-pounder gun as a main armament with two BESA 7.92 millimeter machine guns providing secondary firepower. The Nuffield Liberty Mark III petrol engine generated 340 horsepower, achieving a maximum speed of 24 miles per hour on roads. Production reached 500 units between 1942 and 1943. Despite its improved armor protection, the Cavalier suffered from chronic mechanical unreliability that rendered it unsuitable for sustained combat operations. The General Staff recognized these deficiencies and restricted the Cavalier primarily to training duties in Britain. The type's main contribution was serving as a testbed for mechanical components and providing training for crews who would transition to the superior Cromwell and Comet tanks. Light Tank, Mark 6. This reconnaissance tank represented the backbone of British armored forces at the outbreak of World War II, despite being armed only with machine guns. The light tank Mark 6, developed in 1935, reflected interwar British doctrine that emphasized light, fast vehicles for colonial policing and reconnaissance rather than tank versus tank combat. The tank measured 12 feet 11 inches long, 6 feet 10 inches wide, and 7 feet 5 inches tall, weighing approximately 5.2 tons. Armor ranged from just 4 to 14 millimeters, providing protection only against small arms fire and shell fragments. The Mark 6 mounted either two Vickers .303-inch machine guns or one Vickers and 1.5-inch Vickers heavy machine gun in a small rotating turret. A Meadows petrol engine generated 88 horsepower, achieving a maximum speed of 35 miles per hour on roads. Production reached approximately 1,000 units between 1936 and 1940 across several sub-variants, including the Mark 6A, VIB, and VIC, the light tank. Mark 6 equipped the majority of British armored units during the Battle of France in 1940. These vehicles proved catastrophically vulnerable to German armor and anti-tank weapons, suffering devastating losses during the campaign. The arrival of American Stuart light tanks gradually replaced them in reconnaissance roles by 1942. Early light tanks and Vickers. These obsolete interwar designs served primarily as training vehicles during World War II, providing essential crew instruction despite their combat inadequacy. The light tank Mark I through Mark V represented Britain's first generation of mechanized reconnaissance vehicles developed throughout the 1920s and early 1930s. These vehicles ranged from 4 to 5 tons, featured minimal armor protection of 6 to 12 millimeters, and mounted only machine gun armament. The Vickers 6-ton, developed as a commercial export design in 1928, equipped numerous foreign armies but served British forces only in limited training roles. This two-man tank weighed 6.4 tons, featured 13mm maximum armor, and mounted either twin machine guns or a 47mm gun, depending on variant. The Vickers medium Mark I and Mark II represented Britain's primary interwar medium tanks during the 1920s. The medium Mark II measured 17 feet 6 inches long, weighed approximately 12 tons, and mounted a